Welcome to the DingeCast. We are driven by a passion for discovery and the belief that history should be uncovered. Our mission is to reveal the hidden realities of the past to bring history into the light. Welcome to the DingeCast.
All right, folks, welcome to the DingeCast. We have an exceptional guest tonight. We are joined by Patrick Boyle, who is a maritime archaeologist. Okay, everybody who's obsessed with finding things underwater, crazy discoveries, this is the guy. So we're going to pick his brain. We are going to learn as much as possible about what he does, what he's found, what makes him tick. So, Patrick, seriously, man, thank you so much for coming on. This is an exciting night for us.
Thanks so much for having me, Ryan. I'm excited.
Definitely, definitely. So, um, I could probably intro you and kind of give a quick breakdown, but I feel like it's better coming from you. So just tell the people what you do for a living, just briefly some of the projects you're working on. Just give us kind of a rundown of who you are, what you're about, and then we will get into the nitty-gritty after that.
All right, sounds good. So, like you said, I'm a maritime archaeologist. So I study shipwrecks, submerged remains of cultures, artifacts, things like that. So just think of regular archaeology, but just underwater or strictly related to like maritime things. So right now I'm kind of at an in-between phase. I just finished up my PhD coursework and I'm now writing my dissertation. So that's kind of a big feat. And I'm also trying to figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of my career. So applying to a lot of different jobs, both in academia, as well as like a lot of state work and um, CRM, which is like cultural resource management, kind of like public archaeology and applied archaeology. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Awesome, awesome. What's the difference between state work and like academia? Like what's kind of the assignments that you would get? How do those differ?
So academia typically is your own personal interest in like specific research and stuff. And then if you were to do like state work, before I went to do my PhD, I worked as the assistant state underwater archaeologist in Virginia. So whenever there was any kind of major projects related to underwater archaeology or maritime archaeology, we would help out with that and really try to establish some of like the big cultural resources that the state has and kind of bring them to the public's eye.
Very cool, very cool. And like I'm gonna jump ahead of myself here before we really get into it because this is such an interesting component. So you mentioned working in the Chesapeake Bay, so like the Maryland area, and you mentioned that you go after sunken shipwrecks looking for stuff. So you mentioned we're talking pirate ships, right? In some cases.
Definitely, yeah.
That is super cool. Like, so it's like you're saying people are got to be so jealous. Like your job is literally, yes, I go underwater looking for sunken pirate ships and trying to find artifacts and stuff. That is freaking crazy, dude. That's so
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, I'm glad you're kind of like re-inspiring me right now because I always get so in the weeds, especially with school and like writing this, 300-page paper that I kind of forget to take a step back and realize why I really got like into it and kind of remember, like the passion and stuff. So yeah, you make it sound really cool.
It is, man. It is. But that's true though. It's like maybe from a distance it's like, oh, that's so cool, but you're like, yeah, but the day to day is a lot of paperwork and
Yeah.
it's not as it's like Indiana Jones teaching at the school. It's like,
Yeah.
okay. Well, let me take a step back then. I know you got some slides if you want to pull those up. Like,
Sure.
let's break it down for people of just I mean, it's a pretty obvious title here, but just maritime archaeology. Like, what are we really talking about? What exactly is it that you do? Let's just make that simple for everyone here.
So maritime archaeology is really just archaeology. There was actually kind of a debate about that in the 60s and 70s and even to this day. But either maritime archaeology was going to be just kind of like treasure hunting and people just pulling things up from the ocean, or they were going to do it scientifically like they do with archaeology. So it really is just archaeology, but in a underwater environment. And most of my work isn't even fully underwater. It's a lot of like shoreline, coastal, riverine stuff that is submerged at some points, and then when the tide goes out, it is completely exposed. So yeah, so I guess we can talk about some definitions though. So a lot of people use this interchangeably, and it kind of means the same thing, but when we're talking about maritime stuff, it's pretty much everything relating to or bordering the sea. So you can talk about historic ports, you can talk about the ships themselves, you can talk about sunken World War II aircraft, right? Like they're not ships, but they were um,
Oh yeah.
now they're like underwater. When you're talking about specifically nautical archaeology, you're relating or referring to like ships themselves and anything relating to do with uh, ships, navigation, sailors, foodways on board ships, things like that. So if you ever hear nautical archaeology, that's pretty much someone that focuses just on the ships, whereas maritime kind of encompasses everything.
Got it, got it.
Yeah. So I'll just keep kind of going along here. Why do
Yeah,
we
of course.
study the past? It's basically to understand our present and future, and also because it's so interesting. And kind of getting further into the definitions, which I always think really helps. Um, History is the study of the past based upon the written and pictorial record, right? So history is everything that encompasses everything after we began to write. So everything before that is prehistory. And then archaeology is the study of the past based on the things people left behind, so the material record. So that's pretty much everything since the beginning of Homo sapiens, right? And
Hmm.
then when you kind of put those things together, the historical record and the archaeological record contain a lot of information about the human past. So history tells us about the important events and thoughts as perceived by the person who wrote the records, right? That can also be very biased, whereas archaeology can tell us about people's lives as they were lived. And much of human history was never recorded, or the record doesn't survive, it's incomplete, or it's heavily biased. So most of human existence recorded is only recorded by like the actual material remains. And then when you put those together, you get this thing called historical archaeology, which is what most modern day archaeologists are. And that's the study of material remains from eras and places that also have a historical record. So you kind of combine both of them, the written record with the material record, and you can find out a lot of really interesting stuff. And that's where we get kind of like this combination of a lot of information. And for me, that's really cool because a lot of my colleagues are prehistory archaeologists, and I'm not. So like I get to see how they collect data and all of the stuff they have to do, and it's like, whoa, man, I can just kind of find a book or a photograph and compare things. But what I'm finding for my specific dissertation research, which involves these vessel types. It was called a bug eye, and it's actually an oyster boat. They weren't really recorded on how they were built, so the shipbuilders just kind of built them by eye, and they never like wrote down what they were doing or specifically how they like shaped pieces of wood and the reasons why they did it. So instead, there's a lot of photographs, and there were quite a few surviving bug eyes that people were able to like record and draw lines of. But for the most part, they're all gone now, and the only record we have of them are those historic photographs, and then what I've been trying to look for in the Chesapeake, which are the actual like hull remains. And I've been finding a lot of weird things that don't really um, add up because a lot of the information wasn't recorded. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where I'm at.
And that's super interesting. Like, our we know, I would think we know a fair deal about history, but at the same time, it's like a giant puzzle, and we only have so many pieces. So we're kind of guessing, like, well, based on what we found, this is what we can safely assume these cultures were like until we find more pieces that maybe challenge that, and then we have to reconsider. But um, what's interesting in what you're saying, we talked about the Page Ladson site. I like maritime archaeology in the sense of you go way back, pre-Clovis people, and it's like, well, they built their civilizations in an area that's now underwater. The coastal line was stretched way further out, 12,000 years ago,
Hmm.
and we're trying to figure out who these people were. Obviously, there's like very little record of them even existing, but we can fast forward to what you're looking at, which is more recent history, and already we're losing the thread.
Yeah.
And like to me, that's kind of the disturbing piece and why I feel like what you do is so important that, how is it like 200 years ago in some cases we're already like, well, how could they have done that? It's like how it's crazy how quickly certain things can get lost. And to me, that's why this is so important that we don't lose that thread. It only takes a few generations, and it's like, well, nobody asked grandpa or great grandpa how to do it, and now nobody knows how it works. If everything went down now, it's like, do either of us know how to build a computer or how any of this stuff works? We'd be like, find somebody who understands the technology. So, um, it's it's so interesting to me how fragile our collective understanding of where we come from is, and how easily threads can get lost like that. And it's remarkable how much has survived, that we know as much as we do throughout history. Like I can't believe how much we've managed to piece together. It is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it's
Um,
definitely fascinating, and I think that's also why I really like the maritime aspect of it because so much stuff was lost in the oceans and water, and a lot of the times you get really good preservation. So if it's like deep, dark, cold, things are gonna survive pretty well. Remarkably so. Even things hundreds of years look like they were wrecked yesterday if the conditions are
that's
right.
wild.
So it's just a matter of like trying to figure out how to study those things in a scientific way, in a way that we're not going to damage anything, and also a way that we can, share it with the public. So,
Yeah. This is maybe off topic in a sense, but um, generally what you find, you can already kind of place the era based on certain markers, but maritime archaeology is different where you don't have a clean uh, stratigraphic record, right? It's like, well, we found it in this layer of the soil, and we can date that to a certain time frame. Water's pretty lucid there. So I guess let's say you found something that was an anomaly where you're like, this doesn't really look like something from this era. What is the process to determine the age and origin of some of those things? I mean, that's a weird question, but I figure I'll throw it out there anyway.
no, that's a really good point. So it definitely depends on the site, especially if the vessel or like submerged building or something is like covered by sediment. So the same thing definitely happens. There's definitely not going to be as much, but there will be sediment over top of it that can kind of act as like stratigraphy, and you can figure out things that way. And it also kind of separates layers of older artifacts and newer stuff and
Okay.
things like that. But for shipwrecks themselves, that's a really cool part about the field itself, and something I'm not too familiar with because I study all of this newer stuff. But going to school, they teach us about how some of the wrecks that they found in the Mediterranean in like the 60s and 70s were really well preserved, and they looked, like they couldn't be that old, but
Yeah.
they're like found with like ancient stuff. And so they start looking at like the way they're built, right? Like the construction styles, and they are drastically different from what we would find today. So a lot of the older boats, like we're talking like ancient stuff, ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, they
Mhm.
weren't built with like iron nails and frames. They were built with these things called mortise and tenon joinery. So I think I've got a picture somewhere. Yeah, here we go. So we kind of have this idea that boats are built in a specific way. At least people that kind of study boats, where you have the keel and you've got the frames or ribs, then you've got planking, and then you like put a deck on it and a sail, and there it is. But for like thousands of years, they didn't build them that way. They didn't even have keels on many of the ancient boats, they just had the frames, or I'm sorry, the planks themselves with hundreds of these like little holes built into it so they could shove in um, this tenon. So they would dig out like this little mortise, fit this tenon, and then that's how they would put the planks together, almost like a weird Lego.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
they would put these pegs in to keep the tenons in place, and the shell of the ship actually gave it the strength to do that, and that is just so bizarre to me. But
You got to
that's how they
really
did it.
trust that. Yeah, right. Like
Yeah.
no leaks or anything. Like, man,
Yep. And then so there's a lot of ancient Egyptian boats that they have from like they would bury with the pharaohs, and they had this kind of construction, and then they were finding like ancient Greek ships had the same kind of construction, but then they've got a few hundred-year period where they're starting not to do that, and they're adding like half of a frame here to just make sure that that piece doesn't fall off. And then they start making the bottom a little thicker, and then they start actually connecting the whole thing, which we call the backbone. And that's kind of how like the skeleton built craft were initially created. But like we can actually find that through time, and we didn't find it at first. It took a lot of different shipwrecks throughout, the past 80 years to really figure that out.
that's wild. I know we're both in North Carolina, and I'm sure you've seen just how many shipwrecks there are off of OBX, just
Yeah.
because it's just that was the hot spot once upon a time. Which if you're familiar, so I love OBX. I've stayed in Avon a few times, and I looked up the history of the bay. Right. So if you're not familiar with OBX, it's super skinny little island strip off the coast of North Carolina. You got to drive way down. So you can have a house and you're basically looking at the bay and then you're looking at the beach. It's super thin. But what I learned was the bay used like the sound, whatever you want to call it. It used to be a forest. It was all trees and shipbuilding, repairing ships. Like this was the place to go to have your ship repaired or built. They cut down all of the trees there to build these boats, and that decimated, the forest. It changed the ecosystem, and then after a few floods, it flooded and never returned, and that's where the bay came from. So that's that just to show like the scale of how many boats are out there, but how many boats have crashed close to that shore or sunk. Like I'm not a treasure hunter, but if I was, that would be the place to go looking for these old Spanish ships with millions of dollars of coins on there. But I digress. But
It's
uh,
it's funny you bring that up. I was actually just on Hatteras Island
oh,
last
cool,
weekend. Yeah.
nice, nice.
Yeah, so I just got back.
Is that for work or just for leisure?
Just for fun, but actually, which is a good segue because I can bring up some photos. The first archaeological project I was ever on was actually on Hatteras Island.
Oh, cool.
And uh, one of the PIs of the project, he's a native of the island. He lives there still, and he just opened up like a mini museum for the project, which was all about the lost colony of Roanoke. So they think a lot of the survivors may have gone down to Croatoan, which is Hatteras Island, and we were there to investigate a site that is pre and post context of indigenous Native American site on the island, and found some really cool stuff. And they're doing a lot of cool work. They just need to publish more on it so we can get it out there.
Yeah, that's wild. Does he speak the whatever that language is? I can't remember the name of it.
I have no idea actually.
There's some
Yeah.
like UBX people that still speak the native language, and it just sounds like some weird like Irish gibberish, but you're like
Yeah.
like I swear this makes sense to people. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I've know there's the Ocracoke Brogue. I've definitely heard people
I think that's what
say
I'm.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So he doesn't sound like that, but
Okay.
I've they still exist.
Oh, for sure, for sure. They're keeping it alive. Can you talk about any of those finds, or do you have to wait until that all gets kind of published before you can really speak to that?
Oh no, I mean, man, I think I was there 10 years ago, 9, 10 years ago. Yeah, so this was probably taken 9 years ago. But it was actually when I was doing my first master's degree in England. So I went to the University of Bristol, and they had a kind of like a partnership set up with these guys. So I ended up coming back to the States just for like a field school project, and this was it. So my first introduction to, I guess this could still be considered maritime archaeology, was definitely a terrestrial site, and it's a little different. So in the United States, a lot of the terrestrial sites are the trenches that they dig are actually pretty small. There's usually multiple, but like British archaeology, they put in a massive trench and they dig the whole thing down. And I don't think I have too many photos of the finds and stuff, but it's just kind of like the process of digging down layer by layer, and it takes days. I think we were there for 3 weeks,
Yeah.
maybe even a month. But basically, we kind of like take the dirt out layer by layer and see if there's any kind of like features in the sediment where there could be like post holes from where buildings were set up, and then basically we screen all of uh, the finds and stuff. And it takes a while to kind of like get your eye around it, but we were finding all these tiny little beads, like these
Oh
amazing
man.
Native American beads, and tons of like animal bones, oyster shells, lead shot from when they were using like old flintlock guns to like go hunting and stuff. But the amazing thing is
Yeah.
you just dig down layer by layer, and as you're going deeper and deeper, you're going farther and farther back in time. And
Yes.
there was one specific layer that we were looking for, which would have been around the 1590, I think, 1580s, where the Lost Colony um, traveled to Croatoan. So, like around there, we wanted to find the kind of like interaction where these Native Americans would have been interacting with these, Europeans. And then once you kind of cross down beyond that layer, things change drastically. So obviously there's no lead shot, um, but even the way they were making pottery changes. So it's just crazy. And then you get to the point where there's definitely no humans. So it was
Yeah.
pretty cool.
That's wild. There is a site in South Carolina they found where they found like the old pottery and it had cool decorative designs on it. Somehow they actually found the piece of wood that they carved the designs on a piece of wood, and then when the clay is wet they actually stamped it to make the pottery have that design.
Oh,
Like
cool.
somehow the wood stamp survived right alongside of it, which was
Wow.
what a crazy find. Um, I feel like I need to just shut up because you have a lot of slides here, you have a lot of cool stories, and I hope we have enough time to get to some of these. So I don't know if you want to go like Lake Champlain, Chesapeake Bay, whatever is kind of top of your mind. Let's just jump to it and just please just share some of the cool stuff you're working on. Like what gets you really excited? Like I would love to take a look at that.
Cool. Well, I guess I'll just go in order here since we've already kind of established where I was when I kind of started off this career. So I went to my undergrad in history. I just loved history, and so I got a history degree, and I really started trying to figure out what I wanted to do with that. And I love scuba diving, and I was like, how do I put this together? And it's like, all right,
There you go.
underwater archaeology. So while I was studying at England, my thesis was on uh, this island called Lundy, and it's off the southwest coast of England in the Bristol Channel. And my topic of choice, of course, was piracy. So I was really into pirates growing up, and I have been into pirates ever since. And a lot of people really like pirates, so I guess this would be a good place to start. Um, yeah, so I was studying Lundy Island for pretty much an entire year, and the island itself is pretty small. It's only like 3 miles long and half a mile wide.
Oh
Um,
man.
there's only a few buildings on the island, and it's basically kind of a getaway location for older tourists. But the island itself is a very strategic place at the mouth of the Bristol Channel, and was used off and on by pirates from the 13th to the 19th century. So an ideal pirate haven because it was secluded enough that pirates would not really be bothered, but it was close enough to have access to the mainland. And here you can see it's kind of just like in this lower portion where the grass is a bit greener that all the buildings are, right? Like the whole thing is basically barren.
Hmm.
And most importantly, the ships within the Bristol Channel were at the mercy of the tides, which made the timing of ships and their routes like very predictable. So, the pirates could just kind of figure out what time all the ships were going to leave or they were going to come in and they could just like attack them. And then also it's so close to the mainland when there were no ships to capture. Typically, when they would capture so many, they would kind of scare everybody off for a while. They would just start like raiding the coasts.
Oh man.
And the island itself is elevated and surrounded by these like really steep cliffs. So there really isn't like an easy way to get onto the island except the southeastern part. There's like a little, um, I guess you would call it like a key, where you kind of like dock your ship safely and kind of scramble up
Hmm.
the cliffs. And now it's like a modern road, but um, so my problem with studying piracy initially was like, how do you do that archaeologically? Because we have like this romanticized Hollywood image of pirates, right? Like you're not just gonna go out and find a skeleton with a peg leg and a treasure chest. Like that's in the movies. Like pirates basically just looked like the regular sailors of the day. So would it even be possible? And this was a really cool place to study it because it's such a small island. There's the historical documentation that pirates used the island on and off for centuries. And then luckily the whole island has been like dug up archaeologically, scientifically. The reports are out there. So all I basically had to do was kind of go through everything that's been done and just try to see if I could relate anything to piracy. Um, but basically, the primary documents listed multiple areas on the island that each pirate group kind of used in their own specific ways. And without getting into archaeological theory too much, you can basically explain that an object, a structure, or a location can be attributed to a specific group or culture as long as they used it in their own unique way. So, to one person that creates a fork and uses it as an item to like eat food, another person might use it in a completely different way, as like a pick for something. Um, so the object itself is the same, but the way you use it is completely different, and that kind of transforms what the object actually is.
Hmm.
So I kind of use that theoretical approach to look at what I knew what the pirates used. And the main thing they used was the castle that's on the island. So the castle is now a reconstruction, but the original like parade grounds are there, and a lot of the pirates use the castle, of course, to kind of like hide out in, camp in, and then when it was kind of a ruin, a lot of them used slaves, and they kind of just housed them in the castle. And there was also this like smuggling cave right at the base of the castle, and that was used off and on by a couple of different people, specifically for like smuggling things. And then, really cool inside, there's actually graffiti from like the late 1600s, early 1700s, um, of like some of the enslaved people that these like pirates would keep on the island. And one historian actually kind of figured out where a lot of the initials and times came from specific ships dropping them off, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah. Do we
Um,
know who like how old the castle is and what culture originally built it? I'm guessing the pirates just occupied it. They weren't the architects there.
so don't have the specific slides, but the first guy to kind of be a pirate on the island was named Morisco, and he did something where he either had someone try to assassinate the king, or he just wasn't involved in it at all. But obviously, the king at this time, it was in the late 1200s, so early 1300s. Um, he wasn't going to kind of like let that happen, so he sent a bunch of guys out to Lundy, where this Morisco guy lived, and he had him killed. And then the king kind of took over the island and realized that it would probably be beneficial to have some kind of fort out there, and that's when the original castle was built. And it was kind of built off and on and reconstructed multiple times throughout the years, but the original foundations are still there.
That's wild.
Yeah. Um, but another problem with studying on this island, which was pretty cool, but couldn't use a lot of it. There's stuff everywhere. And like tourists, they find things on the beach or just like laying around in like fields and stuff. And luckily they give them to the workers there. But um, I had no idea like where any of this stuff came from. And there's like a little mini museum on the island, and like in the windowsills, they've just got iron artifacts kind of just like corroding, and they've got broken ceramics and, pottery and stuff. And I was like, there's so much stuff here that I could use, but I have no idea, what the context is.
Of course.
And
Yeah.
and then another problem is, what people think they are, and then they tell the workers where they found it, and it kind of just becomes this game of telephone. So I've got this picture here of this long iron bar, and there's like this ball in the middle. And the warden of the island, wanted to show it to me and said, like, it was taken off one of the wrecks, and it's probably some kind of cannonball. And I was like, okay, there is such thing as bar shot, but typically bar shot has like the cannonball sliced in the middle, and half is like on one end of the bar and the other half is on the other, and that just kind of like swings through the air and is supposed to like mess up masts and things like that. But I'm looking at it and I'm like, there's no way this thing's bar shot. I don't know what it is though. And then I found out that the ball itself actually moves up and down the iron bar,
Hmm.
and it messed with me for like weeks. Like I knew I couldn't use it anyway, but I just kept thinking about it. I was like, what is that thing? And then it hit me that it's probably like the handle off of a vise,
Oh,
So like
okay.
the ball itself is attached to something, and yeah. Um, but man, they've got a lot of cool stuff there that I really wanted to use. Like this is a slate gaming board they found at the base of the castle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I thought this was so cool because the game itself, I forget what the name is, looked like this game that they played in North Africa, and there were actually Barbary pirates from North Africa that used the island, and I was like, this could be like the smoking gun. This could be it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I reached out to this guy at the British Museum who's actually like an ancient board game expert, and he assured me that this was actually Roman,
Hmm.
which is pretty wild. There's not a lot of like Roman stuff on Lundy. Sure, they definitely could have gone there, but they probably wouldn't have stayed very long.
Yeah, yeah.
So like, just stuff like that. And so that's Lundy. And then real quick, also while I was in England, I got invited to a dig in Repton, which is in Derbyshire. It's kind of like in the middle of England. But it was the site of the Viking winter camp in the 870s, so 873 and 874, I think. Um, and it's mentioned in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. So it's basically where the great heathen Viking army camped over winter while they were like taking over England. And a big battle happened, and like a lot of the Vikings died, and like a stone's throw away from where this picture is, there's just this like huge mound of skeletons that they excavated in I think like the 1970s. So well, she's kind of famous now. Dr. Kat Jarman was still doing her PhD when I was there. She invited me along, and this project was basically right next to that kind of like burial where they think the Vikings probably would have camped, and it was just trying to see like artifacts there, what they missed, what we can find, and she did a lot of work with the actual like human remains of like Viking bones and things, and testing a lot of cool things out like that.
No.
And I was just there just to kind of dig and help out. So I've got a lot of pictures of that. But the really cool thing is the church itself, which is right next to it. Um, the bottom portion of the church dates to like the Anglo-Saxon period. And I remember like we got to go down there and see these pillars, and I'm pretty sure they used like a scan of the room in the Assassin's Creed game, Valhalla. So you
Cool,
actually get to
cool.
go to Repton in the game. And I was
Yeah.
like, no way. Like, so like I bought it and I played it and like you get to go down there and they have the like the swirling columns in there. I thought that was pretty cool. And then,
Wow.
they've got some like Viking artifacts and stuff. So
Is that a surreal experience to be like when you find these artifacts, right? Because my big thing is you're walking in the same footsteps as these people 1200 years ago, and it's like this was the same spot, but just it feels like such a distant time. What is that like physically being there, finding the artifacts themselves, not just me being a tourist using my imagination, you know?
it's pretty awesome, man. And like it's hard to kind of um explain to people like in the moment. So actually at Repton, we do the same thing, terrestrial stuff where you like take up the soil and you screen it and stuff, but every once in a while something like won't fall into a bucket or like it'll just kind of like fall out or something. So we have the big spoil pile where all the screen stuff just gets kind of like piled up. And so one night I, kind of like finished up early and Kat was like, "Do you want to go rummage around the spoil pile and see if like there's anything we missed or whatever, like bring the metal detector." So and I want to say we'd been there for like a week and we really hadn't found much. And I, had the metal detectors just kind of going through stuff and I had a hit. And I was like, oh God, we missed something. Damn, now we can't use it because it's, like not in the right context. Uh, but it was like this really heavy, like stone looking thing. And I was like, oh God, what is this? And it was like covered in mud and I didn't want to, mess with it too much, but it was just really heavy. So I gave it a cat and she's like, oh, like this feels like lead because it's so dense and heavy. And she's like, I'll check it out. And then the next morning she brought me chocolates and I was like, what is this for? And she's like, because you found a gaming token from the Viking game Nefelteffel. And I
Wow.
was like, no way. Like, so like that really hit me like, whoa, okay. So that was probably like one of the coolest things I've ever found. And she had a picture of like, examples they have in like museums and stuff, and it looked just like it. Um, so it's really cool, but like in the moment, like you're working, it's hot out, you're basically just digging holes all day and screening stuff. And depending
Yeah.
on where you are, you could be like in Florida, right? Where it's like mosquitoes, ticks, the sun, humidity, and like, that kind of moment really just like makes it all worth it.
Oh, totally. Like here I am, like glamorizing. I'm like, oh, like everybody's jealous of your job, and you're like, at the end of the day, it's weeks of digging, getting bit by bugs, and not finding anything.
And that's
It
the
takes a
fun
lot of
part.
patience. Yeah,
Yeah, like I would say 90% of my entire career is like in the library, in an archive, in an office, just like writing uh proposals to do projects, researching projects, and then like during the summer, the 10% of like what everybody does is for the field work is what's really fun.
yeah, yeah. That's like I have a metal detector, and it's like you would think you'd have certain guaranteed success rates in certain locations, and I'm like, I could walk 6 miles. I don't even get a ping on like an old Coke can. Like I'm like, how is there nothing?
Yeah.
There's nothing here. Like I can't. It's very discouraging, but you just keep pushing because you're like, I know at some point we're gonna find something. Man,
Yeah. That just
we want
happened to
to.
me the other day. Like the other really cool like thing that I found like recently was it was just like an artillery shell fragment at this site in Lake Champlain. It was a Revolutionary War battle, and the British and the uh, revolutionaries were just like beating the hell out of each other with cannons and stuff, and just to like pick it up and realize like, whoa, the last person to touch this like put it in the cannon was,
Yeah,
yeah, pretty crazy.
that's what I'm saying. Like you feel something. It's hard to articulate, but you're like there's a weird connection that you get from stuff like that.
Hmm.
Um, well, I don't know if you want to keep if you got more Viking stories or if you want to jump to something else, but I feel like you probably got a few more Viking tales here.
Yeah, it's up to you, man. Kind of get kind of more into some more recent stuff.
Yeah, let's do it.
Um, I think the first project that I went on where I really like felt like, okay, I'm a maritime archaeologist now was when I helped out
Yeah.
one of my colleagues in Hawaii on this World War II airplane. It's a P-47 Thunderbolt, and it was awesome, man. Like, finally, a beautiful location. Visibility was pretty great for what I'm used to in like diving in like black water and stuff. You can actually see what you're looking at. So seeing that, plus I love World War II
Crazy.
history, and it was amazing, man. So finally seeing the wreck, I was like, awesome. Like I'm being paid to be here. He's collecting samples of like the aluminum, like basically outer shell of like the fuselage and wings and stuff to test corrosion. Like we were doing some really cool stuff. So that was pretty awesome. It's in Oahu, so right off the coast, kind of by where those little islands are, and it's obviously beautiful. And it's only like a couple of hundred like yards off the shoreline. So we just would kayak out there with all the scuba stuff, and then dive in to do our stuff. Yeah, and then this is what a P-47 would look like. But yeah, I don't know. Like
That's
I can
super
keep talking
cool.
about that, or you got any specific questions?
Yeah, I'm obviously interested in the Chesapeake Bay work, but if there's anything else more recent you want to talk about, I feel like the recency factor is really exciting too, where you're like this happened within the last year, the last few months. That's always adds an extra layer of excitement to it, right?
Okay, so yeah, I just got back about a week ago from the Lake Champlain site. I don't have a lot of pictures and stuff from that yet. I haven't really edited anything. But basically, it was a big battle site from where Benedict Arnold was kind of like giving the British hell. This was when he was a war hero, like before he became a traitor. Um, so kind of funny, but the site itself is actually the gunboat Philadelphia, which is now housed in the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. And through the Smithsonian and the Navy, and then the Institute for Nautical Archaeology, INA, and Texas A&M got involved to do a project to see if there was anything kind of like left from where the Philadelphia sank. And it
Yeah.
was raised in the 1930s. They basically like found the vessel, they went down, they pulled the vessel up. Um, and it eventually made it to the Smithsonian and where it's housed now. But they were like, hey, like if there's anything else down there, it'd be cool to have in the museum. So we
Yeah.
did a lot of remote sensing. So like where you basically drag a magnetometer and a side scan sonar back and forth along a grid. They call it mowing the lawn because that's exactly what it looks like, just with a
Yeah, yeah.
boat, just to see if there's any magnetic anomalies, and then if there are, you can kind of see what's down there with the side scan. So we got a lot of hits, and we were just kind of diving on targets here and there, and then we also set up a a grid on a grid system they actually had already set up from multiple projects over the past couple decades. So a lot of the stuff was already set up for us to just kind of like lay a bunch of like baselines and just kind of metal detect and flag areas, and then just see if we could find anything. So yeah, I had to leave early, so I think they just finished up. But yeah, while I was there, we found a lot of like a lot of weird, strange wooden pieces. I don't know if they're from ships themselves, or they're just really weird looking little like dowel things, and just a lot of like cannonball fragments and stuff because it was just a
Crazy.
big battle site.
Yeah. Are there ever any like natural anomalies that complicate the work? Like I'm asking because I can't remember what the research was for. I'm pretty sure it was Lake Michigan. Um, and apparently the mountains near it are all very like iron rich or some kind of metal. So basically if you're trying to do like metal detection at the bottom of the lake, everything is a positive read because there's all of these little, metal fragments. It's impossible. It's almost like a smoke screen to hide whatever's really down there. Like, do you ever encounter challenges like that in what you've been working on?
It's really funny you bring that up because yes, this site had a couple of different things that were really messing with the magnetometer specifically and the metal detectors. The island itself must have had some kind of like iron ferrous deposit thing because the closer we would get to the island with the mag, it would get a little funny. Um, but then over the battlefield itself was where they must have been like dumping like the they call it clinker. It's kind of like a ferrous metallic leftover. I don't even know what to call it. It's just like this like leftover weird metal
Like
from
slag, is that the
it's
word? I don't
it's
know.
very similar to like slag
Yeah.
where they're like burning stuff for the steamboats like in the engines and they're just like dumping it out, oh, like in the water, and they're doing it over this battle site. So every single hit we would get with the metal tech detector was like basically slag.
Oh, that's
Um,
terrible.
yeah, so like uh, we eventually found some stuff, but and then it was weird because it had just enough signature to set off the metal detector, but you could tell what was clinker and what was like actual like an artifact just by like the way the metal detector were like wah, wah. Like
It's
you
like
could
the strength of the reading, or just like the shape. Like I know you can kind of like I can find a pipe because it's something. It's like I'm getting a reading in a very long straight line versus like a little blip where a coin would be. Or you're saying like the grade of metal was the sig. I don't know. We don't have to get into that. I'm just
Yeah,
curious.
no, like I think it just was just slight enough to like set it off. So like you would hear it and you'd be like, "Oh, there's something metal there." But if you really listen to like the frequency it was making, like the high pitch, low pitch, it was very low.
Hmm.
And then you would go and you would hit something that was like definitely iron or like an artifact and be like really high. So once we kind of dialed that in, we were good. But yeah, stuff was everywhere. So it was pretty annoying.
Yeah, that's funny that I'm glad I brought that up then. I thought that was a random tangent, but yeah, it's like that has to be the such a frustrating aspect where you're like it's yeah, it's like all these decoys, right? Just scattered around just to make your job more difficult.
Yeah. But yeah, if you want me to talk about my dissertation stuff,
Please
I've
do,
got
man.
I've got I'll try to keep it short, but I could talk about these bug eyes for hours. So, like I said before, my dissertation is about the construction of the very specific oyster boat type, uh, the Chesapeake Bay bug eye. And
What's
we
the
talk.
time period for this again?
So the first bug eye was built in the 1860s, I think 1869,
Okay.
and they were used a lot until about like 1910, 1920 when they started really just kind of being abandoned because better boats were built. They were transitioning to like gas powered boats and stuff. And then also they were built for the oyster reefs to go like capture oysters. So they eventually over harvested them. So then you don't really need these boats anymore. But for like a good 80 years, these boats were like the semi trucks of the Chesapeake Bay. So they were used for capturing the oysters, bringing them to market, shipping stuff from A to B. They would ship lumber, they would go down to the Caribbean and pick up like watermelons and pineapples and all kinds of stuff. So these things were definitely like the workhorses of the bay. And
Wow.
then it's almost like overnight they were just, abandoned and they were stopped being used. So, you know, basically the bay was built using these boats and then they were just kind of all forgotten about. So that's where I come in. um,
Yeah.
what can we learn about, these boats, these hull remains before they disappear? So for my dissertation, I looked at three very specific bug eyes, and there's way more. There's dozens and dozens more. They think about 600, even maybe even more than that were built and used during this time period. But for my dissertation, I focused in on the three bug eyes that I knew about that had like really weird construction features, so that I could kind of compare them all. And one in particular I wanted to use was this one called the Bull Cove bug eye. Uh, we call it that because it was found in Bull Cove, and we don't know the name, but that's what it looks like. It's
Wow.
a really weird looking boat because the older original like traditionally built bug eyes were built using basically trees. They were like kind of how you would build a canoe or like a dugout canoe where you would
Yeah,
just
yeah.
use like the whole trunk. So they would lay these trees together and kind of shape the inner and outer hull, and then they would pin the trees together. And they call them logs. So The original bug eyes were built using like this really weird construction method of pinning these logs together. And then just because of resources and they wanted a like more durable vessels and lack of the big trees that they wanted, they switched to the typical plank and frame construction sometime in like the 1880s. So a couple of the other vessels I'm looking at are the plank and frame built ones. But yeah, this is the Bull Cove bug eye, and unfortunately, it's not there anymore. And that's the reason I wanted to use it in my dissertation because
Mm.
we found out about it when I was working in Virginia. The property owner just like saw it kind of appear on her beach one day because of the way this little inlet was kind of eroding the shoreline. And then sure enough, we would go every single summer to, kind of like monitor it and resurvey it. And yeah, sure enough, it's just kind of like breaking apart.
Oh,
Um, so yeah, now it's not there, unfortunately, but
yeah.
we gained as much information from it as we could, I think. And basically I like got all of the dimensions of it and got curvatures of like, the inner hull and the outer hull where I could. And this is like my reconstruction of the boat and what it would probably have looked like um at the time, which is pretty cool. But some historic photographs, like this is uh a builder building a much smaller vessel. It was a log canoe, but it was basically the same thing, right? Putting those trees together, and then at some point they switched to the plank and frame
Yeah.
construction. But then another one of the vessels I'm looking at is the Hobbs wreck, and this is in Suffolk. So this is a bug eye as well, but as you can see, it doesn't look anything like that other one. It's not log constructed, right? It's the planks and frames, and it's got really weird positionings of like where the masts would be, and then that center board is kind of like offset, and the center board was basically just used as a lateral resistance when it was going out into deeper waters because they built it to be very shallow drafted, so it could also go up like inland waterways and stuff. But again, that's that's what I think it would have looked like, and my main reasoning is the weird mast placements. The main mast is much farther in the center of the vessel, like midships. So the other ones are much more spread out. So they have a different, I think they have a different rig. So the ones that are closer together are probably schooner rigged, as you see here. Um, whereas the other ones were this leg of mutton sail configuration, which
Yeah.
I think is pretty cool. So that's kind of the stuff that you look at. And the schooner rigged bug eyes were definitely historically recorded, so we know that a few of them carry that kind of rig, but the photographs of them are super rare. So there probably weren't many of them. And it'd be really cool if, one of the ones that I'm looking at um, is one of these, which I think is pretty fascinating. And then the final bug eye that I'm looking at is in Mallows Bay, the national sanctuary, the NOAA National Marine Sanctuary. Are you familiar with this one?
I'm not. No, no.
So I'll show you where it is. It's really cool. It's on the Potomac River in Maryland, and yeah, so it's the Mallows Bay Potomac River National Marine Sanctuary, and there are
Oh, wow.
like 100 shipwrecks there.
Look at that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's called the Ghost Fleet. And it's basically a bunch of shipwrecks that were these steamships built for World War I that never saw service. And they didn't really know what to do with them, so they kind of just like abandoned them all in this area, and they salvaged what they could. But yeah, just the holes at the water line and below are still there, and now they're kind of like this beautiful like artificial reef system, and they're growing like these trees and stuff, and it's pretty amazing. So then off kind of like in the smaller cove, there's a bunch of other small watercraft that people have abandoned over the years because, hey, where should I put this boat? I don't want anymore. Go put it with the 100 that are across the river.
Throw the
Um,
dump. Yeah.
so there's a bunch of watercraft over there, and mine
Oh, man.
is like just tucked away. But we strung a baseline on it, and it's very difficult to see in the water. But when the tide's out, you can get some pretty decent visibility. But yeah, we put put the baseline out and took just a bunch of measurements and kind of made like a really cool, site plan. And I took some curvature measures so I can kind of like reconstruct this hull. But it's definitely a log constructed vessel with that centerboard. It's got some really weird uh, placements for the frames or the masts as well. So, I still have a lot to kind of like interpret from that, but this is kind of like what it looked like. It's
Yeah.
pretty difficult to see.
That's the kind
But
of water I'm used to. Yeah.
yeah. But that's what the boat kind of looks like. There's the kind of like the outline of where the hull is, and then there's a bunch of frames and like the mast steps and stuff. So very similar to the first wreck I showed you.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
this thing's cool. It's called a goniometer, so it measures curvatures. So I can basically put that kind of like in a line along a curve of a wreck. Usually use like the frame or something, and there were frames. But you can just kind of measure the curve, and then what you can do with that is you have like the actual like hull curve that you can kind of figure out like what the boat looked like at different areas. And while we were on this site, we weren't really looking for artifacts. We were just trying to get as much information about the boat as we could. But I said like if you guys find anything, like we'll document it. So we will take them up, we'll measure it, photograph it, but we'll put it back. So everything, we put back where we found it.
Yeah.
But the coolest thing we found was this teapot,
That's
and
crazy.
I know that was pretty fun to find. And it has like this like marking on it of like a 7, and we think it was from the 1870s, and we think we named the vessel, and which was built in 1881, so fits pretty well. But yeah, just like that's the archaeology, and then you have to kind of add the historical research. So going through like archival material and stuff, I was able to find a lot of information. And I found this really cool drawing, which I think depicts the bug eye that we were looking at, which is Bessie Lafayette. And I didn't know that there was another bug eye there. So I'll have to go back and look for Lola.
Yeah.
But that one was there is a wreck there, so I didn't know it was a bug eye. But this was recorded in the 90s, like they kind of placed like the wrecks. But what's cool is you can kind of just kind of see from their map that this is our site. This is the other potential bug eye, which means the artist was probably somewhere right there.
Hmm.
Looking at that angle, man, that's pretty much dead on. So, that's a key piece of evidence that I think my vessel is the Bessie Lafayette. Not that it like totally matters that you can like name the vessel or identify it, but it just provides so much more information for you. So for me specifically, once I knew the name, I could basically trace, the Bessie Lafayette, um, history and like the lifetime of the vessel. So,
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
so I was able to figure out that it was actually abandoned at a specific year in Mallows Bay, Maryland. So like I'm like, all right, so I'm like 99% sure this is the boat. And then I thought somebody was messing with me because I found so much information about this boat. Like this artist kind of, I guess, traveled around the Chesapeake, and he was, just kind of like making drawings of like the abandoned vessels. And one of them happened to be Bessie. And, there's just like all of these drawings. I'm like, this is great. And I'm looking at this one and I was like, man, that looks really familiar. That thing is called a bobstay. It's just what holds the bowsprit like stay, like this line to the hull. And I was like, man, like it looks so weird because I'm pretty sure we found it.
Yeah.
And it even has like the same 3 holes in it. And I was like, wow, man, this is awesome. So again, it's kind of like, those moments. And again, like the artist just like drew a bunch of different, like he must have climbed on it and, just did a lot of sketches. And dead eyes, those are really common on like uh sailing vessels. So we found a couple of those. And then for some crazy reason, he had like this interpretation of what the kind of like cabin would have looked like. And I was like, oh man, if he added like the kettle in there, I would have been so excited. But he's
Yeah.
just got
Yeah.
like a pot.
What was the era of the that these drawings are from?
So he did these in the 1930s.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so we think the boat was abandoned around there, although it's listed in the um the actual records as being abandoned in 1933. So he was drawing them in 1936, so that definitely fits.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Um, but yeah, the records are kind of weird. Sometimes they like have to catch up a little bit. But yeah, I mean that's kind of where I'm at now. So I've collected all this data and now I'm just kind of going through everything and you know, trying to figure out what it can tell us about these boats that, they didn't really record how they were built.
That is super cool, man. So I
Thanks.
guess the this is kind of where my mind goes when we're talking about this of like how much time do we still have to find and study some of this stuff before like the one you said like it's breaking apart, you know, um how much time do we have to get this information before it is kind of lost to time?
That's the $1 million question,
Yeah.
and I don't know. Like it really depends on not just like these bug eyes, but different sites. So it could be, we could lose stuff tomorrow that we'll never get back.
Yeah.
Luckily, a lot of these bug eyes sank like in the deeper portions of the bay. And so I think, they're still out there and they're probably being covered by sediment, and a lot of them will have the potential to be preserved, but you just never know. And like you never know what's going to happen through any kind of environmental change. But yeah, like you said, just the one that I'm looking at is already it's gone. So
Yeah.
what we recorded is all we'll have about that vessel forever.
All right, well, I guess my last question for you then is the way that this work happens, right? Like there needs to be funding. You probably need permissions in some cases if it's
Hmm.
private property. Um, how can people support this? If people say, "I love what you're doing. We need to speed this up so that you can get out there more, find more stuff more quickly." Is there any kind of bridge to get the public connected to you or other groups to help, fund these to make sure you have the equipment, the resources, the labs for analysis. Uh, how do people support this kind of work, basically?
I mean, there's tons of different ways, but I think, just for the average listener, it's just, stay intrigued about it, be passionate about it, read up on it. Um, Yeah, and just show people that you're interested and that, this is important stuff. Like we're all interested in this. But are people how many people are going to dedicate their entire lives and career to doing this? Like not many. So as long as the public remains interested in what we do, I think we'll always have like a career. So I think that's the best way, really.
Well, keep making content so that people know what you're doing
Yeah.
because there is a huge interest in this, and I feel like some people feel like it's hard to comb through everything else and find this kind of stuff, which is a perfect segue. Patrick does have his own podcast, so if you are interested in this, you can tell him about it. The Nautical Nerd, you could tell him about it, but we'll have a link in the description, obviously. But what I guess it's mostly like this, but tell people about what kind of topics you're covering, what you expect to cover in the coming months here.
Yeah, thanks. Like I said, man, I'm really busy, so I only get to it when I, have the time. But yeah, it's called Nautical Nerd Maritime Archaeology, and it's basically just kind of me doing exactly what you're doing, interviewing really cool people in the field. Most of them are people I know, and I kind of focus on, what they're doing and kind of like what they're doing career-wise, but also I like to focus on how they got there. So it can help like future generations of maritime archaeologists and people who are really interested in trying to get into this as like a career. And then I'm also a co-host of another one called Scholars Flask with a friend that I went to Texas A&M with, and that one focuses more on kind of different scholarly work. So it might be, we might have like a historian on one day, an archaeologist, a geologist another day. So things like that. But again, like just kind of like little hobbies. We have our friends on there just to kind of, see what they're up to and the cool stuff that they're working on. But yeah,
Okay.
feel free to reach out to me with any other questions.
Definitely, definitely. Well, I mean, I guess that's my point. Like, I appreciate obviously what you do just in terms of your career, but the fact that you also take the time to try to share this stuff. Like, I feel like most of us, it's either local news or national news. You get like a short little article, old dugout canoe was found, and you
Yeah.
get like you get like one picture and a quick hot take, and we don't really get to see too much behind the curtain of what you guys are doing, and all the pictures and videos you've shared. This is the kind of stuff I feel like a lot of us are really looking for. It's rare that I find, a really good, well-produced documentary that goes in depth, that shows what the work really is like. I told you about the Paige Ladson group where, they were out there for the one group was out there for 2 years, and their equipment was breaking down because they got this old used junky donated equipment to work with. So they're like, all right, well, today is delayed because the boat won't start, and then the equipment's not working, and, they were ready to give up after so many months. And seeing all of that work that went into it, then all we get is, archaeologists found a thing. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
Next, and it's like the story behind it is an important part of the story to me. So, please keep doing what you're doing, man. Share more stuff. I really, this is really cool. I don't know. I'm just rambling, but it's really cool, but it's really important because it doesn't really mean anything until it doesn't mean anything until you find that one bit. Then all of a sudden we're all excited. We want to know more. Um, but I feel like there's a lot of gems along the way that are almost equally as important for us. It's like I said, it's a puzzle piece. History's a puzzle, and we need to look at all of the pieces to really understand the bigger picture here. So
Cool, man. Well, I really appreciate it, and I love the public engagement aspect. So, you've definitely inspired me to keep, you know, doing the podcast as long as I can when I have the time. So,
awesome,
thank
man.
you.
Well, do you have any closing thoughts, or just kind of like what you would tell people? Like, here's what you need to know about what I do. Here's just any bit of advice, anything. What's on
Um,
your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I guess kind of like to your point where, what you see in the news is just a small little portion of it. And I'd love to share like the entire project A to B, start to finish with everybody. But it's a lot of time, right? Like it's a career. So
Yeah,
90% is the prep, 10% is like the field work, and then in that tiny 10% you might find something, you might not. So um yeah, just support the field however you can, but just stay interested, I think is the best way to do it.
awesome, man. Good advice. Well, seriously, thank you for your time, man. Like you said, I know you're busy, and I was super interested in what you were doing, so it's an honor to be able to talk to you.
Cool, man. Well, thank you very much. This has been great.
Awesome.